So this talk, platform engineers are product managers. Really what I mean by this is if you want to be a good platform engineer, you should adopt a product management mindset. My name is Justin Reock. I work for DX. I'm their deputy CTO. Previous, I was the head of relations at a company called Cortex that ships an internal developer portal. And before that, I was the field CTO at Gradle, where I studied and talked about developer productivity engineering. So I've been pretty much neck deep in developer experience and developer productivity now for a number of years, and found it to be a really fascinating field of study. Don't worry too much about slides. If you want the slides, they are already available for you online. This recording will be available in just a couple hours as soon as I can push it through post. I got a rig set up back there that's recording me right now, so you can have the recording and slides immediately. I will flash this up again at the end if you don't get a chance to pull it in now. Okay. So this is the problem statement for platform engineering in general, right? We have this huge sprawl of tools that we're expecting to be used as a productivity platform for developers as a way for them to do their jobs, and it's confusing. So we have tried to establish a discipline that makes it easier for developers to deliver in already enabled pipelines that we've worked on in DevOps for years, problems that we've solved by DevOps. DevOps obviously didn't come from nowhere, right? It came from Agile, it came from change management principles. You can trace it all the way back to the ancient business wisdom of the 70s and 80s when we were talking about things like theory of constraints, and I still believe, obviously, in a lot of those principles, but I think it's also a fair criticism that it's fair to ask, like, where's the dev in DevOps? We shifted everything left, we put everything on the developer, we made them even more of a bottleneck, and it wasn't until we started moving into this platform engineering discipline that we really understood that DevX needs to be a part of this discussion. And so I think if you look at platform engineering, what you really have is stuff that we've learned from DevOps. So any of that hyperbole around, oh, DevOps is dead, it's getting replaced by platform engineering, that's not true. That's not true any more than Agile has been replaced by DevOps, right? We took what we learned from those disciplines and we built on them as the landscape around us changed, and that's what's happened here, right? We can take what we've learned from DevOps, but we also need to have better consideration for developer experience, and we need to adopt a product management mindset. So think of providing the platform as a product, the same way that you would think about delivering a product to your customers, except in this case, developers are your customers. So treat users as you would treat your customers, right? And measure your success and gather feedback in the same way that you might for a product that you're actually shipping. You need to think about product strategy for your platform, prioritizing different features. You need to deliver platform roadmaps and let developers know what's coming. You need to report on these platforms and their health. And you need to look at the right kind of metrics to determine whether those platforms are healthy and they're really reducing toil and friction and frustration from your developers and improving their experience. That's supposed to be their whole point. You need to develop these platforms iteratively, the way that you would develop any other product that you might be shipping. You need to solve specific needs. You need to anticipate those needs, right? You shouldn't be an order taker, right? Where it's just, oh, I need this feature, right? You should adopt the type of mindset where you predict based on looking at metrics and gathering feedback what your developers are going to need to get out of that platform, and you should deliver it to them. And you should take an agile approach. You should release frequently. You should store configuration for the platform in an SCM just like you would anywhere else, right? These are the things, if you start thinking about your platform in this way, it will go from a collection of infrastructure as code scripts or automation into what you can actually call a real platform, right? Management should be responsible for anticipating the needs of the users, gathering system metrics and qualitative metrics, and we're going to talk about methods for that in just a moment. But ultimately, you should take responsibility for the user experience of the platform. And then how do you measure success? Well, engineering intelligence metrics, which are getting more and more sophisticated. I love to promote the Core 4 framework, which is the newest and best productivity framework out there, which is a combination of Dora, Space, and the DevX metrics. Look at adoption, look at onboarding percentage, like make sure your developers are actually using the platform. And then of course, concentrating on developer productivity and ultimately developer experience. All right, where to start? Well, this is a DevOps conference. We all should be somewhat familiar with Dora at this point. These are the 4 Dora metrics. The Dora metrics are outstanding. They are a great way, a distilled way to talk about the health of your underlying engineering systems. Deployment frequency is an incredible measure that tells you what kind of culture you have. Do we have a culture? Do we have processes? Do we have automation where we can release 100 times a day? We may not need to, but what happens the next time the biggest, new high-profile vulnerability gets announced? We need to patch it. It's not going to take us a month if our deployment frequency is 100 times a day, right? So we are getting good things from DORA, and of course this book by Nicole Forsgren, Dr. Forsgren, popularized these, and everybody started, using DORA. But a lot of what happened with DORA was, okay, we need to start measuring DORA metrics. Let's do it. And then nothing happened because there wasn't enough focus on other bottlenecks that didn't have to do with software delivery. There wasn't necessarily an audience for the data. So ultimately, DevOps DORA have not captured all the bottlenecks and friction and obstacles to throughput. There's a lot of them that are hiding in plain sight right in the developer experience. And a 10x organization that wants to 10x their developer experience by being better platform engineers should consider every aspect of that value stream, both internal to the developer's head and external to the systems that are actually delivering software. We also need to make sure that we're avoiding something called Goodhart's Law. Who's familiar with that? Right, where a measure becomes a target, it ceases to be what we would consider to be a good measure, right? If we are incentivizing or if we're punishing based on some single metric, then we need to stop doing that because that means that that metric is no longer going to be a good one. So how do we deal with that? Who's familiar with SPACE framework? Right, so SPACE framework is a metric framework, builds on DORA metrics to add a satisfaction metric to this. And rather than look at any one single metric, we look at the story between the way that different metrics affect one another. So now we have this wonderful conundrum that's happening right now as we speak. If we want to measure developer productivity, do we need to look at qualitative metrics, self-reported metrics, or do we need to look at system metrics? SPACE allows us to do both of these things. We can survey developers, and we can get data from them that's self-reported data, and we can cross-reference that data to data that we are gathering from systems. But most organizations are still not aligned on this at all. When we look at the different dimensions, I'm going to go through this study very quickly, but effectively developers, when they were polled in April of 2022, so just 2 years ago, about how they thought about productivity, no one's thinking about these dimensions the same way. Developers were thinking about things in terms of raw activity, what am I doing? Whereas managers were thinking about things in terms of performance. So we need to be more empathetic to the developers, and no one knows more about friction in the development lifecycle than developers, so why not just ask them? And sometimes when we look at the way that we put this survey data together, PR cycle time correlates almost identically with asking a simple question like, I get to work on small iterative changes. How often do I get to do that? When you run a survey like this and you get a large sample size and you compare it to system metrics, it's eerily similar. But both of these things have pros and cons. Quantitative metrics can be incomplete, they can lack context, whereas qualitative metrics are difficult to gather. Surveys are hard, right? So that's where the DevX framework comes in, the final most modern metric set before the Core 4, which focuses on things like encouraging flow state for developers, reducing context switching for them, switching from one task to another, and making sure that they can focus their cognitive load on tasks that actually matter. So now we have this. Great. DORA, SPACE, DevX, and they all impact one another, and things are looking very complicated with this picture. That's not even an exhaustive list of edges. So that's where the Core 4 comes in. It's a distillation of these 3 different metric sets into dimensions of speed, effectiveness, quality, and impact. And so now we can do this. The Core 4 allows us to correlate qualitative and quantitative metrics together. The Developer Experience Index, which is part of developer effectiveness, is distilled down to the point where we can say that for every point on this 1 to 100 scale of DXI, we can save up to 10 hours annually per developer by doing this. And yes, there is a math proof available. We look at a lot of different metrics for this and measures. But ultimately, knowing how to measure productivity or even to define it has remained very elusive to the industry. But the Core 4 is absolutely the best possible way to do it. So I would encourage you to take a look at it again. If you need the slides, recording, any of that stuff, it'll be available at this link, as well as some more resources and explanation around how we derive the DXI and why it's important.